We're going to talk a lot about the Libertarian Convention, of course, because I just spent the entirety of the convention watching all of the things that were going on and listening to the speeches and talking to people and conducting interviews. The Libertarian Party did pick its presidential and vice presidential nominees. The presidential nominee is Chase Oliver from Georgia, and then the vice presidential nominee is Mike Termott, who I've done 4 or 5 interviews with now. And just between you and me, I do happen to like Mike Termott a lot. He's had the right answers to every question that I have thought to ask him when I was interviewing him. And that's the extent of my knowledge, but he seems like a pretty cool guy to me. So let's talk a little bit about this. I have described it several times as a shit show to many people. And in fact, it kind of was. Although I will tell you, I don't go to a lot of actual political party conventions. The thing that's different about the Libertarian Party's convention is that they don't do their business until the convention is going on. Like Republican and Democrat Party, they get all of their business done, and then they have this forward-facing, front-facing, unified-facing front when they actually have the convention and do the speeches and stuff like that. During the Libertarian Party convention, they're actually voting on all sorts of different party things and bylaws and all this crap that I don't care a lot about, but apparently there's a lot of people in the party that care about these things. The other thing that happened was the Mises Caucus did get a little win in keeping Angela McArdle as the chair, but of course their preferred endorsed candidate, Dr. Michael Rectenwald, did not win the nomination for president. Let's talk about a few things that happened. I guess the first thing is I want to give you a little bit of an overview of some of the things that I saw. And it's things like this clip right here of people grabbing the microphone and saying some ridiculous things. This was not the entire convention, but things like this, kind of caused me to laugh a whole bunch, talk about how crazy this was, and then leave the room and try to not hang out there anymore.
I'd like to propose that we go tell Donald Trump to go fuck himself.
Hear, hear!
Yes!
Standing ovation for that.
We are a Libertarian Convention looking to nominate Libertarians. We do not need to give that time to non-Libertarians.
This is not a GOP cuckolding convention.
I move to vacate the chair.
Wow.
A lot of things like this going on at the convention. People are animated and they care a lot, and they got their time at the microphone and they did things like that. There was also a really big applause when they announced that Angela McArdle won her re-election as the chair too. The crowd was very loud and in applause and support for her, and not a lot of booing going on and all that. But there was also a loud applause when that person put up the motion to vacate the chair. Listen, I'm not the guy that you go to tell you about all of the Libertarian Party infighting. I see it split between left-leaning libertarians and right-leaning libertarians. I really hate the divide in the party. I don't know if there is a way to ever fix the actual divide in the party, because they seem to be divided on very fundamental issues, and so neither side wants to compromise. They do have a lot of libertarian values, and so they are people that don't compromise on these fundamental issues. And so I'm not sure if this is something that's going to get fixed. I just don't like the idea of spending so much time fighting over the internal workings of the party. I would like to have a convention where they were fighting over what the best way to get out the vote was, or these new organizations that they could help to door knock and the phone bank and to do things like this, like ways that they can actually expand the party. And instead, we kind of spend a bunch of time fighting over these internal issues, and that's really unfortunate. So RFK Jr. and Donald Trump spoke. Vivek also spoke, among with a lot of other people. Mike Lee also spoke, and then Ron Paul gave a speech on Sunday. The Vivek speech had a lot of boos, a lot of heckling. Vivek handled it pretty well. He's a guy that can handle heckling at crowds. RFK, I would say, way less heckling and booing. His speech was definitely written to pander in a really great way to libertarians. He basically went through the Bill of Rights and explained what his position was on each one of these and that he was the best candidate to protect each one of these amendments. I actually think that he did the best job talking to the libertarians that were there. He seemed to get the least amount of heckling out of all of the candidates. And then there was Trump's speech. So I'm one of the guys that I do think that having Trump come to the convention and speak was a good idea, clearly, for marketing. There were a couple hundred media people there, 200 or 300, I think. The line just to get into the Trump speech, just for media, was extremely long. And you go out into the media right now and you search Libertarian Convention or Libertarian and Trump, and you just see pieces written in every single major outlet about this. And I don't think that that's something that would have happened if they would not have had people like Trump and RFK and Vivek there speaking to the crowd. If it were just a bunch of libertarians that were there preaching to their choir, I don't know if you would have had C-SPAN covering the entire thing. You know, C-SPAN broadcast the convention for like 12 hours yesterday. And so I do think that as far as that goes, it was a good idea. And it's up to libertarians to decide whether or not they're going to vote for any of these candidates. It's also up to the libertarian candidates to make sure they keep those votes, to make sure that they win those votes. It's a free market of ideas. And so I'm not afraid of libertarians hearing other people speak. They hear these other people speak all the time. I think this was clearly a ploy to try and get some media attention. And as far as that goes, they were able to do that. Now, oddly enough, it was the Mises Caucus side that decided to bring Trump and RFK and all these people to the convention. And now all these major news outlets are running stories about how the libertarians denied Trump and RFK their nominations because they both seek the libertarian nomination for president. That was part of Trump's speech that we'll talk about here in a second. So the stories go like, oh, libertarians deny Trump and RFK the nomination and instead go with one of their own, Chase Oliver. And so now you have many major news publications writing about this, and now they're writing about Chase Oliver, whereas it's kind of weird. I don't think if Trump and RFK and these other people were there, that Chase Oliver would be getting all of the media attention that he is getting right now. And so I hope that he realizes that, and I hope that a lot of the left-leaning libertarians realize that this idea to bring these people here is actually going to end up helping Chase Oliver. The big thing, I'll go with the good news with Trump's speech, which all of you already know, but I'll tell you my thoughts on this. Trump did promise that he would commute the sentence of Ross Ulbricht, who's been in prison for 11 years now. He's the creator of Silk Road, which is a place where you could buy and sell things. And people bought and sold things on that website. Sometimes they bought and sold things that were illegal for people to buy and sell. And so they basically took every single one of those instances for what happened, and they gave Ross Ulbricht 2 life sentences plus 40 years for creating a website where other people did things that were against the law. It would be like putting the contractor who built the road in prison for 2 life sentences for all the people that used the road to go and do things that were illegal. So Trump promises that he is going to commute the sentence. This was also one of the strategies. In fact, weeks ago or month ago, whenever it was that this was announced, it was the very first thing that I was told when one of my buddies in the Libertarian Party on the Mises Caucus side called me. He said, just so you know, the deal that we were trying to work out now is that he is going to come and speak at the convention, and in exchange for that, he is going to pardon one of these people that people are asking for pardons for all the time. Now, at this time, I was told that it was going to be Julian Assange, that they were going to drop charges against him. I didn't hear Ross Ulbricht mentioned at that time. And it ended up not being Assange or Snowden. It ended up being Ross Ulbricht. I think that he is a guy that deserves to have his sentence commuted, and I think this is a good thing. Here's what that sounded like.
On day one, I will commute the sentence of Ross Ulbricht to a sentence of time served.
So the crowd was obviously really happy about that. It was kind of funny. He did this late in the speech. Up until that point, he had been getting heckled and booed to the point where you could barely hear him in the actual room because the sound at the Washington Hilton in that ballroom, the Columbia Ballroom in that hotel, was absolutely terrible. And you could hardly hear him speaking. People were heckling so much that it was actually hard to actually hear him inside the room, which made it really awkward for me because I've done a lot of sound in the past and I'm kind of a sound guy at heart when I go to places, and it just made it for a really awkward experience for me. He waited until late in the speech to make this announcement, and after he made that announcement, most of the heckling stopped. He probably, maybe in hindsight, would go back and say, well, I could have said that in my first paragraph, and maybe these people wouldn't have heckled me the entire time. I don't know. And by the way, his speech was absolutely ridiculous. He is very out of touch with libertarianism. I'm not entirely sure he knows what libertarianism is whatsoever. He promised to put a libertarian in his cabinet. Okay, that sounds great. Wouldn't it be great to have a libertarian in his cabinet? It would. Does he know what a libertarian is at all? I'm not sure, because his speech was actually just him reading through an article that he found on The Spectator, or one of his, I guess his speechwriter, one of his people found on The Spectator, about why the Libertarian Party should embrace Trump. So this guy named D. Roy Murdoch wrote this article about why libertarians should embrace Trump. Trump presented him to the audience as one of the great libertarian thinkers out there in the world, a tremendous libertarian, a great, very libertarian guy. He just bent over backwards to talk about how this guy was a great libertarian. I don't know the dude personally, but I did go through all the articles that he's written, and I found exactly one where he talks about libertarianism, and it's the one where he says that libertarians should back Trump. So I don't think the dude is a libertarian whatsoever. So when he tells me that he's going to put a libertarian in his cabinet, what does that mean? That's a big question. As far as whether or not he is actually going to commute the sentence of Ross Ulbricht, a lot of the response to the post that we put online has been, why do you trust Trump that he would do this? The answer is, I do not. I don't trust Trump that he would do this. But right now, this is the greatest chance that Ross has ever had to get out of prison. This is the closest that he has ever come to getting out of prison right now. And the front runner, I think still the current, I haven't looked at recent polls, but say the front runner for the next president of the United States just told a room full of people and every single news outlet and millions of people on Twitter and everyone else who has seen all the articles that on day one, he was going to commute the sentence of Ross Ulbricht. I think that the fact that he is on record, on video, saying that he is going to do that means that it is much more likely that that is going to happen than if the Libertarian Party did not bring him there to make that speech and he never found out who Ross Ulbricht was, and Ross still just kept writing letters and his street team and all his supporters, kept filing petitions and filling out petitions and stuff like that. Yeah, I don't trust him at all. I just think that there is a much higher likelihood now, and it is the highest likelihood that there has ever been, and therefore that is a good thing. And yeah, like I said online, if this actually happens, this will be the single most monumental thing that the Libertarian Party has ever done. Because up to this moment, they have effected almost an exactly zero change in American government, except for having some libertarians in office that maybe have changed a couple things, if you count the Republicans that have made some change, like the Pauls. I don't know if Massey's actually been able to change anything yet with a bunch of no votes, and I don't know if Ron Paul was actually able to change anything in government. Actually, I don't know if Rand Paul has been able to change anything in government other than stopping Trump from going to war with Iran. If they actually get a guy out of prison that was going to die in prison, then allowing Trump to come there and speak for 40 minutes is completely worth it. And everyone just needs to get over that fact. It's bigger than you, and it's bigger than the Libertarian Party even. This would be the biggest thing that they've ever done. Quit your freaking complaining about this, having Trump come and speak. All right. It is up to libertarians to decide if they are going to listen to the things that he's saying. If these people actually listen to the words that Trump was saying and they're like, oh my God, I love this Trump guy. He's great. He's such a libertarian. He's so much better than the Libertarian Party and I want to go vote for him. Then that's on them. Then you haven't done a good enough job keeping libertarian votes. And that's on you. That's a free market of ideas. This was clearly a good idea. And if Trump wins, it's going to have a life-changing outcome for someone. And if that's all we get out of this entire cycle, I think that it was worth it, because it's not like the Libertarian Party was going to win anyway. Everyone knows that. It's going to be either frickin' Trump or frickin' Joe Biden. Those are the only options out of who's going to win. Okay, so if we at least get one win out of this thing, then it's completely worth it. Next thing on the list, I did want to, I don't like it when people make stuff up. All right. And the Biden-Harris campaign headquarter official Twitter account, I think it just means that they have no idea what libertarians do, what libertarians think. They've never been to a libertarian event before, of course, even though they were invited to come to this one along with the other candidates and declined, most likely just ignored that invitation. They post out that Trump's speech got drowned out by chants of hypocrite while he was speaking. Now, first off, is Trump a hypocrite? Yes, Trump is a hypocrite. I'm not pointing this out because I want to defend Donald Trump and say that he is not a hypocrite whatsoever. But I don't like it when people say dumb stuff. And I don't like it when people take the words that libertarians are saying and then say that they're saying something else at all. And then when I go through the comments on this, it's completely ridiculous. Of course, and then some libertarians try to get on there and tell them what they were chanting. And of course, they just get made fun of in those comments, say that they're coping and all of those things. Here's the chants of hypocrites for Donald Trump. Okay, now, as libertarians, the people listening to me right now in this group, what were they chanting? You let me know. Yeah, in the Fed. That is what they're chanting. I can forgive you for thinking that they were chanting hypocrite, of course, if you've never been to a libertarian event before. But there's this guy named Ron Paul. And this guy named Ron Paul had a book called In the Fed. And when Ron Paul was running his presidential campaigns, he got so many people excited about ending the Fed that every time this guy would come out and speak, they would chant In the Fed. And in fact, throughout the entire week of this Libertarian Convention, during all sorts of speeches that were going on, the Libertarian crowd would erupt in chants of In the Fed. Now, remember what the one of Trump speaking sounded like? And then here's the video that I took of Ron Paul coming out on stage yesterday. So you could say that the entire crowd that was cheering and clapping for Ron Paul was also calling him a hypocrite at the same time. Or you could assume that they are chanting In the Fed in the way that they have been chanting for Ron Paul and for other candidates as long as I can remember and as long as I've been around the party. That's exactly what they were doing. They were chanting In the Fed. Trump did do something at the convention, by the way, that I found to be pretty surprising. I didn't expect it, but he did actually come out and just ask for the Libertarian Party nomination. Okay, I didn't expect that whatsoever. Here's a little bit about what that entire thing sounded like.
Think of this. First time in U.S. history that a presidential candidate of a rival party will address the convention of a party that is presumably gathering to nominate its own candidate. Now I think you should nominate me or at least vote for me, and we should win together. You heard those words. Nominate me or vote. Vote for me. Because the libertarians want to vote for me, and most of them will. And it's very important. Because we have to get rid of the worst president in history. And together we will. And without it, there's a risk that we could have 4 more years. We won't have a country left. So what is the purpose of the Libertarian Party getting 3%? What is the reason to take a chance of having this horrible president destroy our country, which he will do in far less than 4 years? It's not going to take 4 years. That is why I'm committing to you tonight that I will put a libertarian in my cabinet and also libertarians in senior posts. Pretty good. That's pretty big. Or you can keep going the way you have for the last long decades and get your 3% and meet again, get another 3%. No, you want to make yourself winners. It's time to be winners. You have a lot of common sense. It's time to be a winner.
I mean, I was in there and I was just laughing at that point. I thought that was pretty funny. He literally came in front of the crowd at the Libertarian Convention and asked for their nomination or for their votes, which is ballsy first off. And then he said, or you can just keep getting your 3%. Then you meet again and you get your 3%. I'm sorry, that's funny. Whatever you think about the guy or however much you hope the Libertarian Party gets more, he's right about that fact. And the Libertarians should take some responsibility there and say, yeah, we've been a party for 50 plus years and most we've ever gotten is 3%. We need to figure out what the heck is going on right now. Unfortunately, the Libertarian Party is made up of a bunch of people who hate central authority, hate to collectivize. And so I think that is inherently always going to be a problem with the Libertarian Party. And anytime someone gets in power in the party, well, ooh, there's a person in power. Oh, that's not good. Can't trust that person. We need to get rid of that person. And then there's a person in power. And it was like, oh, no, that's not good. We can't do that. And so they never make it past that point because there's always someone just above them in power. And so they just focus on that person. So they think they can keep going to the higher levels and it never actually works because they just keep infighting the entire time. Now, as far as what the crowd sounded like right here, I did want to point out that I'm not in support of heckling someone while they are speaking. Heckling is different from booing during the breaks in someone's speech for typically where you would have an applause. Dave Smith did a good job talking about this. You can go to his page and watch his video where he gave a couple minutes beforehand telling people not to be leftist sissies about this whole thing. I think that being respectful doesn't mean that you don't boo or whatever when other people are applauding. But I do think when you invite someone to come speak that you should let them speak without trying to talk over them or shout them down or just heckling them consistently throughout the entire thing. There are other people there who might actually want to hear him talk. The sound was terrible in that room. And so if you weren't right next to a speaker, you could barely hear what he was saying. And it just made for a really unprofessional environment. It made for a very immature environment. And it did sound like libertarians can't handle someone talking with whom they disagree. And I don't like that at all. We should be able to listen to the person talk and either don't applause or boo when other people are clapping, but you should let them speak when it's their turn to speak. I think that is what free speech is. Okay, you're not up on the stage. No one's here to hear you, or they would have asked you to come and talk, and they didn't. Let's get to Chase Oliver, the presidential candidate for the Libertarian Party. I've had Chase on the show before. I think he's a nice guy. Okay, I do. He seems like a good dude. He also put in a ton of work towards this campaign. He campaigned in all 50 states. He got a lot of volunteers. He had a big showing here at the convention. Tons of people wearing his shirts, tons of signs. He was doing the groundwork the entire time at the convention. He worked really hard to get to this point, and he beat out the other candidates. And as far as I know, as far as I can tell, he beat them out fair and square. And so if you don't like the outcome, well, we'll talk about that when I finish up this conversation. I'm going to start this conversation about Chase by saying I really like his vice presidential nominee until I find, if I see some other stuff in this platform that I've never asked him about, then I'm always willing to change that. But I did go through his whole platform on his website, and I have talked to him 5 times now. That's Mike Termont. Seems to be a really good guy, very libertarian guy, and has had great answers every time that I asked him a question when he was on the show, and had, in-person, non-official conversations with him as well. So I'm in the position again where I like the vice presidential nominee and not the presidential nominee. So last time around in 2020, I still voted for Joe Jorgensen and Spike Cohen. And I felt okay about that. One, I really like Spike Cohen a lot. And two, Joe Jorgensen didn't violate any of these fundamental principles of libertarianism. Now, of course, there was the messaging thing in 2020. But as far as what she said the government should do, she had the right answers to those questions. In 2016, Gary Johnson, I could not vote for him because I had a fundamental disagreement. I think that his belief that a baker should be forced by the government to bake the cake or get fined or go out of business or whatever it is that would happen, get sued or whatever, that went against the fundamental libertarian principles. In 2020, I didn't think that. That's why I was able to vote for Joe Jorgensen. This time, with Chase Oliver on the ticket, unfortunately, he's got something that I believe goes against a fundamental libertarian principle, and I will not be able to vote for this ticket unless he sincerely changes his stance on these things, which he's probably not going to. That's what I want to tell you. But I am going to be not voting for him honestly, not based on anything that anyone is making up, and not based on the fact solely that he is gay. He is openly gay. He is 38 years old. I think he's going to be the first openly gay presidential candidate, like for a major party that's going to be on all the ballots and all that. I don't know, whatever those taglines are. I don't give two shits about that whatsoever. As long as he's not hurting people and taking their stuff, I think you live your own life the way that you see fit. But I'm also going to call people out when they just say things that don't make any sense about this, when they criticize things that had nothing to do with libertarianism, or when they just make things up. I'm going to start off with, this is the kind of thing that I'm going to be looking for. Because Chase and I happen to have the same opinion on something that even some of the people in our private Discord group have disagreed with us on. But even then, I don't want things to be misrepresented. Like Tim Pool, who posted, the LP just nominated a pro-vaccine mandate candidate. So in this post, Chase Oliver was talking about how Democrats were wanting to force people to get the vaccine. And he called out Democrats for being pro-choice until it came to the vaccine. And then someone commented back to him about that. And Chase comments back and says, give me autonomy and property rights. You mean a business can decide to require workers to be vaccinated or limit customers to those with the vaccine. I need to pull up the entire tweet. I had it pulled up earlier. But basically, Chase said that businesses could require people their own decisions, not forced by the government, that a business could require people to be vaccinated to do business with them. In my opinion, that is him coming out strongly in favor of property rights. I agree with him on this issue. And saying that a business can set whatever requirement they want to set for their customers, in this case a vaccine, is not the same thing as saying that you are pro-vaccine mandate. Those are very different things. You can accept the fact that a business has the right to set that restriction on who they're going to do business with, and you can not like it at the same time. I know that because that's how I felt. I thought people requiring their customers to be vaccinated was ridiculous, but I supported their right to do it. That does not make me pro-vaccine mandate. That makes me pro-private property rights. So things like this from Tim Pool, those are things I'm going to be looking out for. One critique of him I've seen is what people call virtue signaling during the pandemic. Okay, he's a guy that talked about wearing masks. He posted several photos wearing masks, talked about how masking was important and keeping space between people when he had his Thanksgiving dinner. For instance, he responds to this guy who said the CDC director says the biggest coronavirus threat right now is not big gatherings in public, but small family gatherings where people take off their masks and the virus spreads. Chase responds, says, I'm having Thanksgiving of less than 10 people and we will be masked inside. And when we eat, since masks have to come off, we have spacing happening. It's not impossible to be responsible. Limit the size, wear a mask when not eating, space yourself accordingly. So I'm a guy who did not agree with the wearing of masks. But if people want to wear masks, then that's completely fine. If you want to do something that has basically no science backing it, in fact, a hell of a lot of science that says it was actually a bad thing, then go right ahead. What's important to me is whether or not the government should require people to do this. So far, I have not seen anything where Chase supported the government requiring people to do this. He talks about being responsible. All right, those are very different things, and we can disagree with his thoughts or where he was on the science of being safe and responsible during the pandemic. Some people got it wrong. Some people got it right. Some people are still wrong, and some people have been right the entire time. But if you're not saying that the government should require people to do this, then I kind of don't care, because that's what's most important to a libertarian candidate, or about a libertarian candidate to me. No, I don't like the fact that he's a guy that would either not go into the science to see about whether or not masks were a good idea, or that he's a guy who did go through it and still came away with these conclusions on the whole subject. But as long as he's not going to force that on me, then I don't really care. He also got the vaccine. I've seen a lot of people posting about this. Well, guess what? The co-host of this podcast also got the vaccine. All right. If Charlie Thompson ran for president one day, would you not vote for him because he went and got the vaccine during COVID? Maybe you wouldn't, but Charlie's one of the most libertarian guys that I know. And Charlie wanted to go out of town for a really stupid reason. Okay, but he wanted to go out of town. He had to get the vaccine to go and do that. All right. Now, if someday he runs for president or runs for office and people are saying, don't vote for this dude, he was virtue signaling or doing stupid stuff during COVID or whatever, or there's a picture of Charlie wearing a mask or something like that, I would know, personally, I would know, and a lot of you guys who listen to this show would know, well, okay, well, he did those things, but I know Charlie. I've been listening to him for 1,000 episodes, and he's a super libertarian guy. And his best friend of 20 years says he's also a super libertarian guy. So not a great way to judge people is what I'm saying. Now, listen, I'm going through all these things and I'm saying I'm still not voting for the guy. But I don't want to see critiques that I think that have nothing to do with what's important for a libertarian president and the way that they would govern. I get that you don't like the people would do that personally. So I'm going to go through all these things that a lot of you people are probably going to agree with. And I'm doing it because I think it's fair. And I'm doing it because I'm probably also going to critique Chase a whole hell of a lot up until the election. And I also think it's important to be really fair and get all of the information out there to people. So people like us who are maybe on the right-leaning, Mises Caucus-leaning libertarian side, or the only libertarian side, you know, whatever you want to call it. So we don't go out there online and say a bunch of stupid things, and then people say that we're just being homophobic or whatever it is that they're going to say, and that we're just making stuff up, and we never looked into any of his actual platforms or things that he said in the past. It's just so we have the full amount of information that any amount of critiquing that we do is actually truthful, and it's rooted in things that he's actually said in his actual platforms as a presidential candidate, so we don't look like idiots. So when it comes to the military, he wants to close all the overseas bases and immediately return active duty personnel to domestic bases. End aid being directed to nation states currently at war. This includes Israel and Ukraine. He says we can offer moral support to our friends. He says he would immediately abolish the death penalty for all federal crimes. Here's one thing that I do have a question on. So something that I would probably disagree with here. He says I would have prosecutorial officials, federal prosecutorial officials, look at alternatives to life without parole. So a life sentence where you never have a chance of getting out. He wants alternatives to that, like where someone can be rehabilitated and can truly re-enter society, even for a crime such as murder. So I'm against the death penalty. I'm totally fine with abolishing the death penalty. I have to think a little bit on this whole getting rid of life without parole for someone that murdered someone. Now, one of the main reasons I'm against the death penalty is because I don't trust the government. I don't trust their prosecutors. I don't trust their investigators. I don't trust them to put together evidence of a crime and an argument that someone should be killed by the state. I wonder if I take that to its logical conclusion, that I also don't trust them to decide that someone would have to spend life behind bars without the possibility of parole and have their whole life taken away from them in that way, and that they would still have the same chances of being wrong or of intentionally being wrong as they did with the death penalty. I think that that's a valid thing to think about. But if you know beyond the shadow, I mean, I don't know how you truly prove beyond a shadow of a doubt, because I don't trust confessions. We're getting to a point where you can't trust videos. I don't trust witnesses. I don't trust DNA evidence anymore either. So how do you ever actually know beyond the shadow of a doubt? I don't know. Okay, we won't spend too much time on that whole thing. I'll have to think more on it, but my initial reaction is to disagree with that idea. In qualified immunity for federal law enforcement, so you guys know the thing. In mandatory minimum sentencing for all those things. In the prosecution of victimless crimes, we know all that. His immigration thing, I've seen that he's an open borders guy. Maybe there's videos or something of him talking about this. I haven't found those yet. His actual platform on his website doesn't say that he's open borders. He talks about making it much easier for people to immigrate here. He actually says things that I have talked about before, where you need to do a medical and a criminal background check to assess their safety. And that's about it. And they need to be able to come in. Like, I've literally said these same things on this podcast before. Okay, there's a tweet right there that Magoo just posted from Chase Oliver saying the best way to export liberty is with an open border. Let money and people and goods move freely and let markets and people flourish. Border control in its current form is central planning that doesn't work. Okay, and then he says, hashtag abolish ICE. Thank you, Magoo. I appreciate that. Yeah, I've searched some other tweets that I did bring in here, but I hadn't looked at that yet. I'm not an open borders guy. I think there needs to at least be a fence and a process for people to go through, so you can at least check and make sure that they're not on the run for murdering their entire family and that they're trying to come and hide out in the United States. That's all you got to do, but it doesn't need to take 10 years to become a citizen. It doesn't need to take a ton of time for you to actually get into the United States. That process does need to be streamlined. But I don't think a fully open border is a good idea. Of course, decriminalizing cannabis. Let me see. Full pardons of persons who were convicted solely for nonviolent drug offenses. Urge every governor to do the same. Let's see. Repeal of the Controlled Substances Act. Push for the passage of the Drug Policy Reform Act and encourage governors to follow suit with what they're doing, because they're, of course, only talking about the federal level. So I think I talked about this earlier. No, we were talking before the show started. He is a pro-choice guy. So that's something where we're going to disagree. I do not know up to what point. So if he is fully pro-choice all the way up to the point of birth, I think that that's absolutely disgusting and actually is murder. And so we would have a very fundamental disagreement on that as well. There is absolutely no excuse for killing a viable baby, and you really can't make many moral excuses for killing a non-viable baby when all you got to do is stick it out for a couple months, and then you could have a freaking human being that might cure cancer or something like that. But absolutely no excuse for killing a viable baby at all. If that's where he is on that, then we're going to have a very fundamental disagreement for sure. He wants to remove the federal government's involvement in education. He wants to abolish the Department of Education. So that's good. Let's see. He wants to end the federal backing of student loans. His answer for the student loan crisis is to get the government completely out of the business of student loans. Okay. He will not support any new gun restrictions and will look to repeal the restrictions that exist today. Okay. So he's very pro gun rights, of course. This is from isidewith.com, and I only brought in the ones where he gave a personal answer. Be careful with that isidewith website. Some of them would say Chase's voter base, and some of them would say personal answer. For example, I accidentally brought one in here that says Chase Oliver voter base. Okay. I want to know the one where it says personal answer. Should a business be able to deny service to a customer if the request conflicts with the owner's religious beliefs? Personal answer. Yes. Okay. He basically just answered the bake the cake argument. Chase Oliver, first openly gay presidential candidate, says You should be able to refuse service. I don't like the idea that it's because of religious beliefs. It should just be on the basis that this is your private property and you get to choose who you're going to do business with. But at least we know the answer on that question right there. Should immigrants be deported if they commit a serious crime? Yes. Personal answer. Yes. Okay. Should the government offer students a voucher that they can use to attend private schools? He says no. That was confusing to me, but later on the answer is the government should have no involvement in school whatsoever. So that's why he said no on that. Should the government require employees of a large business to be vaccinated from COVID? No. Was his answer. Should the government require children to be vaccinated for preventable diseases? Chase's answer is no. That's the vaccine schedule. Okay. Should hate speech be protected by the First Amendment? He says yes. Do you support charter schools? He said yes, our entire education system should be privatized. Let's see, should convicted criminals have the right to vote? He says yes. I hope that means after you get out of prison, because clearly you don't have the same rights while you're in prison, or you wouldn't be locked in a cage. So I think that that's an important distinction to make. It doesn't say incarcerated individuals, it says convicted criminals. If you're a convicted criminal and you have been released from prison, that means that you are able to rejoin society, so you should be able to vote. Should the U.S. defend other NATO countries that maintain low military defense budgets relative to their GDP? He says no, and we should withdraw from NATO. I'm not going to vote for him because of this question right here. Should people under the age of 18 years old be able to receive gender transition treatments? His answer is yes, but only for non-surgical treatments such as puberty blockers and hormone therapy. All right, so he's not okay with the surgical stuff, but he's okay with the hormone therapy, puberty blockers, things like that. I can't vote for that. It's not going to happen. Children can't make that choice, and neither can their parents. Unless this is something that is that, I mean, there are medically necessary reasons that children have to go on puberty blockers, and they have been for a long time. But a kid claiming that they are trans is not the answer. When it comes to puberty blockers, I happen to believe that this is child abuse. I believe that everyone who is on the side of being pro puberty blocker or being okay with this is going to go down in history as a group of people that ruined the lives of however many children that ended up taking these things, that they are going to be looked at and laughed at and talked about as barbarians who were following their emotions and their ideology and not following science. I don't think that people are informed enough. The kids are not informed enough about what their future is going to be. The parents are not informed enough about what the future is actually going to be. It's not like you take this stuff and then you, later in life, you're actually the opposite sex. I'm sorry. That's just not the way that it works. They talk about how these things save people's lives. They only follow them for 12 months, starting from the time that they start these therapies. They don't follow them later on in life. Seems like something that would be pretty important to do. But there are studies coming out to follow people later on in life, and it turns out that they're not saving as many lives as you might think. This is clearly child abuse, in my opinion, and in the opinion of a lot of other people. You're physically altering your kid's body, and you're changing the rest of their life in a very important way, all based on what? The feelings that a 7-year-old has? Can you imagine? I can't imagine taking something that a 7-year-old was saying that seriously, that you would actually decide to alter their lives. I honestly believe that a lot of what happens here is that they have activist parents. I know we've seen that plenty of times, where they have activist teachers that convince them of these things. Sometimes it's kids that maybe would have been gay, and then they get told, well, that must mean that you're a girl. So we need to go on these, we need to block your puberty. I can't imagine support this. I think any parent that has ever done this is absolutely disgusting. And because that's the way I feel about this, I don't care about everything else that we just talked about as it pertains to Chase. I will not support this guy as a nominee of a party that carries the name of my ideology. In fact, because of this thing, and also comments that he's made about kids going to drag queen story hour and stuff like that, I don't care about the pride parades and stuff and those things. I think drag queen story hour is super, super gross. And I think the pride parades where people are undressing or wearing, you know, the ridiculous, basically undressed outfits in front of children, that those people have something wrong with them. And I don't mean that it's that they're gay or that they're trans. I think that there's something else going on there if you feel okay looking like that in front of a child. I don't hate these people. I don't hate Chase. I don't care what people do in their own private lives, but children are to be protected. And when parents don't protect their kids, when parents don't take care of their kids, right now the state comes in. Now, the state still does a really terrible job of that. Look at the work that Spike Cohen is doing over there. You Are the Power. Look at the disgusting things that the state of Georgia is doing. But when the parents don't take care of their kids, or when the parents are hurting their kids, we say that kids should be protected. And right now in the society, the state comes in and takes care of this. Maybe in our ANCAP society, there'll be someone else who comes in and takes care of this, the private organization or something like that. Someone's got to have a use of force if you were going to take away kids. And these parents are hurting their kids. That's what's happening. And my libertarian president is a guy who knows that that's a really bad thing and that kids are to be protected. And the kids don't know what the hell they're talking about ever. That's why they're kids. Okay. What now? I was talking to a couple friends about this. You know, what I realized is that I care a lot about this party after going to the convention. I care what happens, and I want the Libertarian Party to do well. And it's probably not. It might not ever happen in my lifetime. And what I realized was I've got a lot of friends that are in the Mises Caucus. I got a lot of friends that are in the whatever caucus, CLC, Classical Liberal Caucus, or whatever. Today, I felt bad for one of my friends that I know has been working his ass off this whole time. You know, I was texting him, said, "Hey, you know, I'm sorry about the outcome. I know you wanted to go differently. I know you guys put in a ton of work." And then I knew that I was going to come on here and do a lot of complaining about the Libertarian Party and how I hate the nominee and all this stuff. I started to feel bad that I didn't do anything to help. So the decision that I need to make, and that you guys, if you care about this stuff, that you also need to make is, are we going to keep waiting on other people to do this for us, or are we ever going to step in and help? That's the question. Talking about it from the outside, oh, wow, look at the Libertarian Party. The reason that this is weighing on me so much is that I see how few people can actually make a difference in the party, because the way that this works is the delegates from each state go to the convention and they vote and they elect on these issues. It's not like you're one out of the 500,000 actual registered libertarians, what the number is. You know, you're one out of the 800 delegates or whatever there are. The decision that we need to make is, are we going to say, screw the Libertarian Party, this is never going to work, it's time to just work with the Republicans and try to change the Republican Party from the inside, or screw political parties because they're all stupid, but I'm going to continue complaining about everything all the time. I'm just telling you my inner dialogue right now. Elections are pointless, voting is dumb. But also, I hate everything that's happening right now, and I wish it would change. Sincerely wish it would change, but voting is dumb, and I'm never going to take part in any of this. So what choice do you make? I think what I'm going to start with is joining the Libertarian Party of Tennessee, and then we'll go on from there, because I'm in Tennessee, and that's the easiest thing to do, to hang out with those guys and try and figure out what we can do. Then I'll think about joining the Libertarian Party, and maybe actually be able to get someone good elected next time around that we can agree with, that I can agree with, because it's a really gross feeling. I'll tell you what sucks is, I've been talking about being a libertarian for a long time, and then when this candidate gets chosen, I had a friend who said the same thing, I'm a little bit embarrassed about it. I feel like I just came out at the same time as someone who thinks kids should be transed. Not because of the gay thing, because of the gender affirming care for kids thing. That's a very important issue. And so I'm a little bit embarrassed about this as a libertarian, for this to be attached to my name. So I think I either have to decide that I'm going to help change things, or I've got to decide that what am I going to do? Help change things in the Republican Party? Am I going to have a lot better success at doing that? Or just keep talking about things all the time and never go help the actual few amount of people that affect change within this party that we're all talking about right now. So what I found out is that a low amount of people can actually change a lot of things inside the party. And I actually care about what happens in the party. And so I'll join the Libertarian Party of Tennessee, and we'll see about national. So anyhow, you guys almost got me. Tennessee got me. LP National is probably going to get me too.